Alright, hey guys, this is the second video for World War II. The first one was just going over kind of the people in World War II, going over the major leaders. This one's going to be the kind of the entirety of World War II. Obviously, if we were in class, this would be probably 2 weeks worth of information. I'm going to try to compress it into a 10-minute video. So we will talk a little bit more about this. You guys will have some questions about it. Obviously, there'll be a little bit more discussion, but this is kind of what we're confined to, so hopefully this is helpful. If you guys have any questions, if any of this stuff sparks your interest, make sure you guys bring it up in a Zoom meeting, send me a comment, I'll give you guys more information on it, or use this time to finish your ABC book and look at these topics as potential topics going into your ABC book. Remember, we're working on that. That'll be due in May, so make sure we're continuing to work on that. So as for World War II, 1939 to 1945, officially, it's going to be September 1st, 1939 to September 2nd, 1945. So almost hit exactly 6 years later. Off by just a little bit. The United States is not going to come in until 1941, though, but we'll talk about that. Big player in this, one of the big topics that, and everyone's always fascination with this, I mean, there's a million documentaries, there's a million websites, a million everything on this, is the Holocaust. So, in the Holocaust, we have 16 million people are going to be murdered at this time. I use the term murdered just because it's the purposeful act of killing these people. It wasn't that it was an accident. It wasn't as a term of war. It wasn't these were soldiers. It was normal people that, because of who they were murdered at the hand of Hitler, at the hand of the Nazi party that were following orders. The people that make up these 16 million people are the undesirables of is what Hitler called them. So this is not an extensive list, but these are the big ones. Were the Jewish people, blacks, gypsies, crippled, or mentally different were the big people that were targeted for the Holocaust. It was only in Europe that this was happening. This wasn't, they were going to Africa, they weren't going to South America, they were only in Europe, and 16 million people are going to be murdered at this time. This is not everyone that was captured, not everyone that was held in a concentration camp. These are just people that kind of met their end at the concentration camps. 3 million out of this 16 million people are going to be in Poland alone. So that's a huge number. It was a huge target for the Nazi Party, for Hitler and his people that were following his lead. This was a huge target for them in Poland. Some of the camps, again, this is not an extensive list. There are only listed 4 of them, but these are kind of the big 4 that were death camps. There were work camps, there were other camps going on, but these were the 4. Auschwitz was the biggest one. Is Auschwitz-Birkenau, which was actually split into 3 different camps because it was so big. Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka are the 4 camps that I have listed here. Again, if you guys want more information on this, if you guys want to dig deeper into these camps, and you guys are fascinated or just even interested in the Holocaust, those are the 4 names you guys should dig into. I mean, you could take full classes in college on just the Holocaust, and I have to compress it into a couple weeks. For us, it's going to be 2 weeks, really. I would like to do this as a discussion or as an in-person thing, but this is kind of where we're at. In terms of how the camps worked, most of the time, the German people or the German government would rally these people together and put them into what were called ghettos. It's not anything like we consider ghettos today. These ghettos were poor nutrition, poor water, poor food, poor everything. And it was essentially just the people living in these camps taking care of each other because the outside people couldn't help or didn't help. Once these people were contained, they were then sent by rail, for the most part, to these camps. Once they're at these camps, the first method that was used to eliminate these people was firing squad. So they would just take soldiers and would shoot them. That got expensive, especially with the war coming around. So they started to save ammunition. Some of the other things that they used to do was they would actually park trucks next to these rooms and would attach hoses to the exhaust pipes and would pump in the exhaust into these rooms, killing the people with the carbon monoxide. What they end up using and was the most cost efficient was Zyklon B. It was a pesticide agent that they would release into these gas chambers, killing the people in about 20 minutes. So that was usually what they used, most cost effective, and that's what is going to kill most of the people in the Holocaust. So moving on, that is going to go on throughout the war. So that's going to be taking place once Hitler comes to power in 1931. This plan is going to be carried out throughout the war, throughout the 1930s, kind of almost in secret from the German people, from the rest of the world, except for the people that knew exactly what was going on. Poland, like I said, is going to get invaded first by Germany, September 1st, 1939. They're going to use a tactic of war called Blitzkrieg. So for all my football people, with the Blitz, this is where this actually comes from. Blitzkrieg is lightning war, and they attacked quickly and effectively. They would send aircraft with the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force. So they would send the Luftwaffe. They would send the tanks. So the Tiger tanks, the Panzer tanks, which were the big tanks at the time for Germany, which are going to be instrumental for their victory. And they're also going to send infantry. So everybody's all invading at one time. Poland, at the meantime, was attacking back with cavalry. So literally people riding horses going up against an air force, going up against these tanks. Poland was taken over within a month. So the entire country of Poland was taken over by the Germans within 1 month. So after this, we start to skip around a little bit. So we have the Battle of Britain, which is July. It was going to take place from July through October of 1940. So almost every day, the Luftwaffe, or the German Air Force, is going to be flying over, bombing England. It's going to be combated by the Royal Air Force of the UK. They're also going to be shooting V-1 rockets from Germany into, or even France, into England in an attempt to blow up major buildings. Essentially, these rockets were bombs that had a rocket on the back of it as a projectile, but they really had no idea where they were going. They would shoot them off and point them towards England, but really had no idea what they were going to hit. They had a timer on them. They figured we're going to blow up around there. These were also called buzz bombs because the motor would kick off as it was going over the top of London, and it would start buzzing before it would make contact with the building and blow up. So these were kind of the struggles that England was going through. Like we saw with Churchill, these were the problems that Churchill was facing throughout the war. So these V-1 rockets, the Luftwaffe with the raids, were constantly happening all over London, all over England throughout the duration of the war. The United States is going to remain neutral as long as they can. Like we talked about the rape of Nanking in the last video. The United States is going to try to stay out of it, but it's pretty much going to be forced into it. December 7th, 1941, you guys got to hear FDR's speech about this. Pearl Harbor is going to get attacked by aircraft carriers. They're going to send their planes. It's going to be 2 waves of planes. Luckily, the only things that are destroyed are a few aircraft and battleships for the United States. None of the aircraft carriers were destroyed there. They were actually sent out a week earlier. So that was lucky for the United States. But over 2,000 people are going to die at Pearl Harbor. Because of this, it's going to be a rallying cry for FDR. Tons of people are going to join. And it's going to be a big boost to not only the morale of the Americans, but also to the economy of the United States coming out of the Great Depression. Because of this, there's a huge fear of Japanese people in the United States. You guys are a little bit too young to remember this, but after 9/11, is very similar that we saw with our with Muslim people or people of Middle Eastern descent. There was a huge distrust in these people. We took it a step farther in 1942 by opening internment camps for the Japanese people. Now, these are nothing like the concentration camps that Hitler had, where Germany's going to be killing 16 million people. But with these internment camps, if you were Japanese, the United States rounded you up and put you in these camps, and you're not allowed to leave. Now, they didn't kill you, they didn't work you to death, they didn't do any of these terrible things that Germany was doing, but you were not allowed to leave. You were essentially a prisoner just for being Japanese. Because you were declared a clear and present danger by the United States government, we didn't trust the Japanese people this time. They thought they were spies, and so they put all these people that were Japanese or of Japanese descent into these camps. The biggest one being Manzanar. It's in Washington. It was open from 1942 to 1945, and that was the biggest camp at the time. They mainly focused the concentration of Japanese immigrants were in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington, and that's kind of why Manzanar was in Washington. But that's one of the sore spots that the United States has on itself during World War II. And that camp's going to be open through the duration as well. Fast forward just a little bit, so we get the United States moves into Europe. So when we think about World War II, we always have to think about it kind of on two sides, because we have the Japanese on one side in the Pacific, and then we have our Western Front, where we have the United States and England fighting the Germans and the Italians. So the Soviets are helping on both sides, and we'll talk about a little bit with that with our casualties. But on our Western Front with our European front. So we get D-Day June 6, 1944. This is going to be the largest amphibious assault in world history. So coming from the water onto land, this is going to be the largest assault ever in world history. It's going to be invading Normandy, which is France at this time, but it's occupied by the Germans, so the Germans controlled France at this time. It's going to use both air and sea technology. So we're going to be parachuting people out. We're going to have people running out of landing craft from the water. We're going to get people on Normandy however we can. The commander of this is going to be General Dwight David Eisenhower, which is later going to become president after this, after Truman. It's also going to be 156,000 are going to be involved. So whether they're parachuting, they're running onto the beaches, they're engaged on the ships, they're driving the jeeps or the tanks on board after we've completed the landing, 156,000 people are going to be involved. 4,000 of those people are going to die on that day. Okay, in that morning, about 4,000 people are going to die, and 10,000 are going to be wounded or declared missing. One of the problems that we had with the parachuters was you couldn't steer your parachute. Once you jumped out of the plane, you deployed your parachute, you had no control over yourself. You couldn't steer. So as soon as you deployed that parachute, and if there was a gust of wind, it would take you away from the rest of your platoon. And there wasn't GPS, there wasn't radio for every person, so it was very difficult to meet up with your people. Essentially, you had to know how to read a map and work a compass in order to find where you were and use landmarks. Skipping forward just a little bit more, we get to the Battle of the Bulge, which is December 16th, 1944. This is going to be the last effort of Germany. So to think about this, we landed in France in 1944 in June. In December, we're already pushing at the borders of Germany, ready for Germany to fall in just that short time. Battle of the Bulge is going to take about 3 days. It's going to be the last effort of Germany to kind of hold back on the Western Front. By April 29th, 1945, Germany has surrendered. Berlin has fallen to the United States. Hitler has escaped, so to say. There's the main theory is that he committed suicide, and that the Soviets were the ones that captured him, or captured his body. There are other theories that Hitler got away, he might be in South America, He might be working for the Soviets. There's tons of different theories going on. The one that we're going to kind of stick with, that historians kind of stick with, is Hitler committed suicide right before we invaded Berlin. So around April 27th is when Hitler's going to commit suicide. On the Pacific Front, so again, it's kind of hard to think about the two different sides and going at the same time, because we kind of turn our direction to say this way now. But through this whole war, we're going to be island hopping, which means through the Pacific, there's all these little tiny islands that were all being controlled by the Japanese. So what the Americans were doing were, instead of going straight to Japan and getting kind of ambushed on all sides and losing that way, what they were going to do was slowly work its way through all the little islands that were there, take control, and then develop bases there. That way they weren't flying all the way from Hawaii or all the way from San Diego. They were developing all these bases to move resources up to be closer to attack. So two of the big ones are going to be Midway Island, which is going to be a huge naval battle as well, and the turning point in the war. And then Iwo Jima, if you guys have seen the in Washington, D.C., there's a statue of Marines raising a flag up. That's Iwo Jima. That statue was actually posed for, so there's a video of it, there's pictures, but that was actually posed for. They had planted the flag. The photographer wasn't there in time, so they actually took the flag down just to raise it, to send that video back home to show how well they were doing. Once we take those two islands, we're really close to Japan at this point. We start firebombing Tokyo. So we start sending incendiary bombs, so bombs that would blow up and spread fire over Tokyo. Tokyo at this time, most of it was made still out of wood. So you drop an incendiary bomb, you're going to light the whole city on fire. And we were doing this for months at a time through 1944 and 45. Again, if you guys remember from the last video, the person that's in control of Japan is not Tojo. It's not the military leaders. It's not the people. It's the emperor. So we can't really hit the emperor. If we kill the emperor, there's no one to tell anyone to stop. So what's going to happen is we have to slowly work our way up. And we're going to take it to the measure of dropping atomic bombs. For, I believe it was fifth period, or third period, watched a video on the Manhattan Project a while back, so this should refresh a little bit of your memory, and we'll talk more about this on Friday as well. But we're going to develop atomic bombs using the Manhattan Project, which is the code name. We're going to have these people developing nuclear energy, all those kind of things, and Truman is going to come in and say, okay, we're going to finally drop these bombs on August 7th and August 9th. Hiroshima is going to get hit first. Nagasaki is going to get hit second. The plane that's used is the Enola Gay. Just with these two bombs, so just with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was not any firepower on the ground, that we were not sending troops in. We didn't send tanks. We didn't do anything else. We just dropped these two bombs. Just with these two bombs, it's projected between 129,000 and 226,000 people are going to die within about a month. So half the people that are projected in this are going to die instantly. So as soon as the bomb hit, from the force of these bombs, half these people are going to die. Within the next 2 months we're going to have radiation poisoning, we're going to have burns, we're going to have all this stuff that's coming out because of the atomic bombs, and it's going to kill between 129,000 and 226,000. Now, if you guys look at a map of Japan, you guys will see that Hiroshima comes first, and it's more southern, and then Nagasaki, which is right above it, and then the next logical target, if you go in succession, is Tokyo. So we had actually threatened Tokyo, we had threatened the emperor that we had a third bomb that we were willing to drop on Tokyo. We actually didn't have it, we only had these two, so that was our bluff. Japan ends up surrendering on September 2nd, like I told you guys earlier, and the war is now over. To kind of cap things off with our losses down here at the bottom. The Allies, militarily, are going to lose 16 million people. Civilian count is going to be 45 million for a total of 61 million people just for the Allies. For the Axis powers, which is Japan, Germany, and Italy, Militarily are going to lose 8 million. Civilian count is going to be 4 million people, and then 12 million people are going to die in the Axis countries alone. On the military side, and this is kind of one of the things I want to point out to you guys, because we don't really think about the Soviet Union too much in this, just because we always think about Britain and the United States and Germany and Japan. But in the United States is only going to lose, now I say only, but this is a huge number still, 407,000 military casualties. Now compared to our 16 million overall for our allies, that's not that much. But when we talk about the Soviet Union's going to lose 11 million on their own. We're going to lose 407,000. They're going to lose 11 million people just from the Soviet Union. Germany, on the other hand, is going to lose 5.3 out of the 8 million people. So these Soviet Union and Germany are really the two big losses in this. Right after all of this, we're going to get kind of swept up into the Cold War, which we're going to talk about next. But this is kind of the overview of World War II. I wish I could have gone way more in depth on this. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on Friday, especially with the atomic bombs and kind of whether or not Truman should have allowed this. Hopefully this cleared up some of the stuff from you guys and sparked your interest in World War II. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the coming days. Thanks for watching, guys.